Hi, I'm Tiffany. Welcome to Towering TBR. If you're new, I read a wide variety of genres, which this list will show, but I do prefer science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction as my most read genres. You'll see a little bit of everything on this list, and I'm hoping that I can introduce you to something that you're very excited to read next year. I'm going to go in publication date order for books published in the United States. Let's get right into them because I've got 18 to talk about. On January 4th, we're getting Save Our Souls, the true story of a castaway family, treachery, and murder. And honestly, I didn't need more than that. I love shipwreck stories, especially if they're true. And I love them so much. I've even created a video where I talk about my top 5. I will link that if you are also a person who likes to read those types of shipwreck and survival stories. In February, I've got 2 I'm looking forward to. On February 11th, we're getting the 3rd book in the Emily Wilde trilogy, The Compendium of Lost Tales. She's writing a book on fairies and goes out on like little scouting missions to find out what happens, and also forms kind of a romance with a colleague of hers. On February 25th, we're getting a new one from Gillian McAllister called Famous Last Words. I'm not much of a thriller reader, but I read her thriller a couple years back called Wrong Place, Wrong Time, which was a thriller with kind of a sci-fi element. And I loved it so much. And I've picked up 2 more of her books and thought they were really great. So I am excited to read this one. The premise also sounds quite interesting. So, a young mother who has recently given birth is now going back to her job after maternity leave, and she finds out that her husband is in a hostage situation, and but he's not a victim, he's the perpetrator. And what happened? I am excited to find out. March is going to be a busy month. I have 6 titles I'm very excited for. The first and one I'm most excited for is John Green's new book, Everything is Tuberculosis. Why did John Green write a book about tuberculosis? Like, honestly, that story is fascinating. He traveled to Sierra Leone in 2019 as part of a charity, and there he met Henry, a young boy who has tuberculosis. His meeting Henry was quite a revelation. How is it that so many people are still dying from this illness? The fact that there is not enough access to treatment, and the treatment that is available is often expensive. And so he has been a real activist trying to fight for these people to get better. And um, I read The Anthropocene reviewed in 2023, and it made my favorites of nonfiction. I'll link it if you want to hear my thoughts on it. But I have never been a big John Green reader. He mostly writes YA, and I was just like, I'm not interested. I'm older than that, and that's fine. But when he wrote his nonfiction book, I found what a compelling and wonderful storyteller he is. And so I don't know much about tuberculosis, but I am really excited to learn. Also on March 18th, we're going to get Memory by Murder by Olivia Wilde. I've never read this author before, but the premise just sounded amazing. It is described as a cozy space mystery. So our character Dorothy wakes up in a body that is not her own and finds out that people are murdering the people on this luxury cruise that she's taking. And so she decides that she needs to solve the crime herself. It sounds a little bit like the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, but hopefully it won't be quite as convoluted as that one. Another debut I am looking forward to is also coming out March 18th, and that is called The Third Rule for Time Travel by Philip Fracassi. And I'm not 100% sure I'm going to like this because it is technically categorized as horror, and I'm not a huge fan of horror. But I love time travel, and I love to see it used in really different ways. We are in a science fiction like future where they can travel back in time, but like not interact with anything, not change anything, but just basically visit the past. But something goes wrong and she gets pulled into the past and she has to figure out what's going on and how to get back to her own time. On March 25th, we're getting another one by John Scalzi called When the Moon Hits Your Eye. And it's about the moon turning to cheese. John Scalzi is a funny writer, and I really enjoy his stuff. This premise sounds really wackadoodle, but if anybody can pull it off, I think it's him. Also on March 25th, we're getting another funny sci-fi called Space Brooms by A.G. Rodriguez. And it's about a man who is on a spaceship and he's kind of the janitor. He's quite lowly, doesn't have a lot of status, and he basically cleans up like alien excrement. And one day stumbles across a data chip that then everybody wants a piece of him. They all want this data chip, and he has to go basically on some adventures to figure out what's going on. And that sounds awesome. So I'm very excited for that one. I'm excited for all of these. April is going to be another busy month. I have four that I'm looking forward to. And this is probably my second most anticipated book, and it's A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. The first one was called The Tainted Cup, and it was a Sherlock Watson kind of retelling with different magical abilities, walled cities, and some leviathans that are basically why the walls exist. And I loved the world building. I thought the mystery was really fun and creative, and I can't wait for more. I don't really know exactly what A Drop of Corruption is about, but I know that we're going to be following the same characters, and I'm eager to learn more about the world. Another one on April 1st I'm looking forward to is ASL. And it's three teens in the 1990s, and they create a video game together, and then they come back together in a later point. I think it's going to really appeal to me because one, I know what ASL stands for in terms of like social media. Being about the same age as these characters, I feel like it might feel really nostalgic for me. I'm hoping it can be what I was hoping tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow could have been. On April 15th, we're getting the next volume of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. There are these two species that are on warring sides, but they get together and make a baby. And then they are pursued across the galaxy by different people who don't want this baby to exist. And the story is told from the baby's perspective as she's older. And yeah, I haven't read volume 11 yet, but I might just binge them back to back because the story is so fun and so immersive, and I'm looking forward to being back in that world. On April 15th, we have Lost at Sea, Poverty and Paradise Collide at the Edge of America by Joe Clock. This is a nonfiction book about unhoused people who live on kind of abandoned boats, and also the people who are wealthy and don't want these unhoused people in their community. I am utterly fascinated by van life and tiny houses, and so boat life maybe? On May 13th, we're getting The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. This is a dark academia, sapphic romance fantasy. There's a lot of tropes. And that sounds really interesting. We're following a headmaster to a magical school. She's apparently a very, very powerful witch, and she is trying to keep her students safe from demons. I don't know more than that, but I really enjoyed her other book, Some Desperate Glory, that I read earlier this year, and I'm excited to see what she'll do in fantasy. On June 24th, I have announced this for 3 times that I'm anticipating, so let's cross our fingers that it's really gonna happen this time. And that is Silverborn by Jessica Townsend. This is the 4th book in the Morrigan Crow series, which is a fun, middle grade, whimsical fantasy, and I want more from this world. I binged the first 3 earlier this year just because I was so excited to go back. And yeah, if I can find that video, I will link it so you can hear my thoughts on the first 3. 3 more. On July 1st, we're getting the 3rd book in the Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. Basically, we have this coven of witches. They were friends when they were younger, and they basically are kind of protecting England from supernatural forces. And in the first book, it ended on a huge cliffhanger. And so when we picked up the second book, we got that cliffhanger resolved, but it ended on another cliffhanger. And so I just need the 3rd book already. I need to figure out what is going on because we got some information in book 2 that I think I'm just chomping at the bit to know how that's going to end up. On September 11th, we are getting the sequel to Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundell. I read that book earlier this year. I will link it if I can find it. And I absolutely love this magical world. Like this is gonna be future children's classic. Like it is just so good. And we learn about all of these magical creatures and this magical land, and there's a guardian, and something really quite surprising ended the first book. And so I'm curious to see where they're going to go in the second book. The last book I'm going to talk about doesn't actually have an official date. Jenny Lawson has announced her newest book is going to come out in 2025, and it's called Beautiful Hacks for Broken Heads and Creative Hearts. I have read her other three nonfiction books. She has such a quirky sense of humor, and she's quite relatable because she also struggles with her mental and physical health. Okay, so that was all 18 that I am super jazzed about. Tell me, what do you want to read in 2025? And if there are any books I didn't mention that you're excited for, definitely let me know down below. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.